Welcome to Resume Basics presented by The Workplace. Today we're going to discuss what a resume really is and why you need one. We'll also touch on the two main types of resumes and the sections or headings of those two formats. So what is a resume? It's your first impression and your first contact with a prospective employer. Basically, it's your sales flyer, and it tells the employer why you're the best fit for their job. The ultimate goal of your resume is to land you an interview, which is the whole point here. Your resume tells your story and what you can bring to that employer if they decide to hire you. Our customers often ask why they need a resume. In today's world, most job postings are online. Quite often, a resume is the only way to apply for those jobs. Many employers also tell us they won't even consider interviewing a potential employee if they don't have a good resume. It outlines your relevant skills and experience, displays the benefits you can offer an employer, and matches you to the position. If you've done it right, your resume will grab the attention of the employer and lead to that interview. However, a poorly written resume can eliminate you before you even have a chance to show what you can bring that employer. Here are a few facts I want to point out before we jump into the rest of the presentation. Most employers only spend 6 to 7 seconds scanning a resume. If you didn't grab their attention in those first few seconds, there's a good chance they're just going to move on to the next resume. Your email address is so much more important than most people think when it comes to the job search. An unprofessional or offensive email address can cause a recruiter to look no further. The best format for your email address is first name, last name, and whatever email provider you use. It's not only okay, but recommended to have a separate email address for your job search and your personal emails. Many companies use applicant tracking systems to weed through resumes. Basically, this is artificial intelligence reading your resume to determine if you're going to be a fit for the job long before a human ever sees it. If your resume makes it past the software systems, recruiters tend to go straight to the most critical details to see if they want to interview you. This includes your skills, job experiences, and cultural fit. Making it easy for them to find these details can help you land that interview. Let's talk about targeting your resume. When it comes to a resume, one size definitely does not fit all. As a matter of fact, you should target your resume to every position you're applying for. I know, this sounds daunting, but it's a lot easier than you think. If you have a master resume, which we'll get to in a minute, then you're already 90% of the way there. Making sure that you include as many keywords from the job description as you can also greatly increases your chance of an interview. Time to go over a few resume do's. Make sure you format your resume so that it flows smoothly. This goes back to making it easy for that recruiter to find the details he or she wants to see about you. If your resume is clunky, too wordy, or the font is too small, there's a good chance that the employer will just move on. Make sure to keep your resume to 2 pages or less. There are exceptions to this rule, of course, but for most of us, 2 pages is plenty. Use fonts that are easy to read and avoid using too much bold, italics, or underlining. Margins should be 3/4 of an inch to an inch all around, and your font should be large enough to read, but don't use an extra large font just to fill space. Size 11 to 12 font is usually your best bet. When you're listing your work history, only go back about 10 years. If you have older work history that's relevant to the position, or you have gaps in your employment, make sure to choose a resume format that highlights your skills without giving away those gaps in employment or how long ago that relevant job was. Always make sure you focus on your strengths and accomplishments. This is what employers want to know about you. And lastly, always, always, always have someone else proofread your resume. You can have the best sounding resume in the world, but if you have spelling errors, punctuation issues, or your spacing is off, employers will notice this above all else. Okay, time for some resume don'ts. Please don't list your salary history, irrelevant jobs from more than 10 years ago, or include a photo of you or a pet. Yes, I've seen both. Don't include ethnic, religious, or political affiliations unless they are directly connected to the job you're applying for. Don't include additional pages to your resume, such as transcripts, references, or awards, unless the job description specifically asks for them. But do plan on bringing those to the interview. Don't put references available upon request anywhere on your resume. Trust me, employers know that if they want references, you're going to provide them. If you can't, they just won't hire you. And last, but most definitely not least, please never lie on your resume. Even a little white lie can lead to not being hired, or worse, being terminated after you've taken the job. Remember when I said we'd get to the master resume? Well, we're here. So what is a master resume? It's a document that lists every job you've ever held and all of the duties, experiences, qualifications, accomplishments, and anything else relevant to that job. A typical master resume is 4 to 8 pages in length, but I've seen them much longer. My own master resume is 13 pages long. Here's the kicker though. You will never send your master resume to anyone. It's basically your reference material for when you're writing that targeted resume for each job. You're probably thinking, if I'm not sending it to anyone, why waste the time writing one? Trust me, I thought the same thing the first time I was encouraged to write a master resume. But after rewriting my resume a dozen times while applying for jobs, it started to make sense. That master resume makes it a breeze to write a targeted resume because everything is already there. You just need to pick out what fits for the job you're applying to. It will save you time in the long run, and it definitely prevents you from having to recreate your resume every time you want to apply for a new job. It's also a great organizational tool. Okay, so now that we have all of the basics down, let's delve into the 2 main resume formats that employers in our area look for. The first, most common, and still most preferred format is chronological. This resume format lists your work history for the past 10 years, but in reverse order with your most recent job at the top of the resume. This format is also the easiest for applicant tracking software to read. If you have a solid work history with no gaps and are staying in the same career field, this is the format I recommend. The second most common format is the functional resume, though it's called by other names as well. You might hear it titled combination resume or skills resume. This format focuses on your skills and experience rather than your work history or individual jobs. This is the format I recommend if you're changing careers, have gaps in your employment, haven't had a lot of jobs, or are a new graduate. While the format is not as preferred by our recruiters and employers, it still has its merits. However, a few downsides to the functional resume are that employers still tend to think you're trying to hide something by using this format. It doesn't always do the best job of telling your work story, and depending upon how you format the content, it can sometimes be difficult for applicant tracking systems to pull all the information needed from it. Now that we've talked about both formats, let's look at them side by side and go over the typical sections you'll have in your resume. Most of the headings for both formats are the same, with the major differences being the skills and duties section and the work history section. Let's go over the sections that are the same first. The contact information is just that. This should include your name, city and state, phone number, and email address. It's no longer necessary to include your physical or mailing address, but you might want to include your LinkedIn address if you have a complete and work search ready LinkedIn account. The next section will be either a summary or an objective. I'm not a big fan of objectives as they tend to tell an employer what you want from them instead of telling the employer what you can bring to the table as an employee. But if you're applying with a company that is hiring for multiple jobs, this is the quickest way to let a recruiter know which job you're applying for. Either way, it should be a short paragraph, 2 to 3 sentences, on who you are and what you can do for the company. The other common section is education. Where on your resume you list the education section depends on multiple factors, but at the very least should include your most recent or most relevant education, the school name, and the location of the school. If you are a recent graduate, your education should come after the summary. For everyone else, it's usually at the bottom of the page. Okay, now on to the skills and work history sections. While both resume formats have these sections, they are treated very differently. As you can see on the functional resume, the work history is minimal and the skills section takes up the majority of the paper. The opposite is true of the chronological resume. In either format, get as many of those keywords as you can into these two sections to give yourself the best chance of getting called for that interview. Now that we've gone through what a resume is, why you need one, and the two main formats, you're ready to start writing. Here's a list of sites that can be of great help in writing that resume. Also, make sure you check out our resume packet on our website and stay tuned for more videos from us on resumes, interviewing, and more.